Welcome back to Not So Obvious Watches. I'm Pete McConville. I started this channel about a year and a half ago because I heard someone say something on the internet. I wanted to spout my opinion about it, and so I did, and I created a channel to have a venue for that. Since then, I've actually done a lot more kind of watch reviews and all sorts of things that I never intended to do. And I've probably spent less time just giving my opinion and my thoughts about stuff. And I figured, well, since possibly the single biggest piece of news that's happened in the watch community for a while has just been dropped, I may as well do a return to that really early days of just me standing in front of a camera saying, this is what I think about stuff. So, unless you've been living under a rock, you will know that the Rolex group, Chopard, Chanel, was there anyone else? Oh, and Patek have just left. How did I forget Patek? Anyway, they've just walked out of Baselworld, and that's raised a whole bunch of questions. So what I want to do is just run through some of the things that have raised those questions in my mind and just talk about them for about a minute or so. Okay, first question is, was this actually about Baselworld? Was this about the problems, the well-known problems that Baselworld's been having? Or is there something else going on? General consensus seems to be that this is and most people are just piling on Baselworld, saying here it is, it's all about them, they haven't managed it properly, they haven't been sufficiently, they haven't consulted with their brands, they've been arrogant, blah, blah, blah. And that's possibly true. There's a long history of their behaviour, which would tend to indicate that that's been a problem in the past. A lot of other brands have left previously, so maybe this is just an extension of that. There is some things, though, that have come out more recently, and particularly in the statement from MCH, I think they are, the owners of Baselworld, where they've kind of said, well, hang on, Rolex have announced that we made these changes without their call, but they are on the executive that made the decision. They agreed to these changes explicitly. So if we believe that they're not just outright lying to us, then there would seem to be something more going on. I don't think, my personal opinion is that probably if Baselworld was in rude health and none of these complaints had come about, the group wouldn't have left. But I think that it's not just the problems with Baselworld that has caused this split. I think the two main players of this, the Rolex group and Patek, are very much making a power play and taking advantage of this crisis to establish themselves in their own show that they totally control. Which brings me to the second question, which is this move about unity or about division? It was interesting listening to the podcasts from the almost conflicting podcasts from Hodinkee, who have their own view. They're sort of very, very high end. They're in bed with the Rolexes of the world. And their view of what this did with the Worn and Wound podcast, which is very much from the more affordable, more approachable end, who had a very different approach. Hodinkee's view was that this was all unicorns and rainbows, that seeing Rolex and Patek, one group, one company that barely normally even acknowledge the existence of other organizations, seeing them work together in a team was a wonderful sign of unity of the Swiss watch industry coming together to forge, to deal with this crisis. The Worn and Wound guys had a very different view, that this had nothing to do with unity. In fact, it's quite the reverse. This is about division. This is about a small number of big players that can afford to do whatever the hell they want, seizing the opportunity to basically hive off a lot of the rest of the community, which relied upon some of the prestige that brands like Patek and Rolex brought to a show, and basically leave them behind. Interesting division. Probably says a bit more about me. I tend to fall on the Worn and Wound side and say this is not about unity. Two companies that would really normally not like to talk to each other, Patek and Rolex, have got together here, but at the expense of hundreds of other brands. So I see this more as a move around the division into the haves and the have-nots, the powerful and the powerless, the people who bring in customers and the people who want to use those customers. This is about slicing that market up so that the rich and powerful can basically have their own show, run it, and be happy. So my next question is this the end of Baselworld? Absolutely, but maybe not. And what I mean by that is it's absolutely the end of Baselworld as we knew it. Baselworld as the place where the Swiss watch industry comes together, presents itself, presents its new watches. All of that, that's clearly gone now. Between Watches and Wonders / SIHH and whatever the hell Swatch Group ends up doing, and whatever this thing ends up being called, the Rolex Group, Patek, etc. have gone to. You're now up to multiple shows. So the idea that Baselworld will ever be this one place where everyone comes, that's gone. Will a show called Baselworld continue to exist? That's an altogether different question. I'm going to go, it's 50-50 that it will continue. I wouldn't bet against it and I wouldn't bet for it, that there will be a Baselworld. There are still literally hundreds of watch brands who are built into this recurring theme of all coming together, all producing this media event, all presenting to the media at once. There's a company that's on the hook that owns the rights to a thing called Baselworld, which has a monetary value. I think all of that will continue to exist, and so as a result, I think it's as likely as not that there will be a show next year called Baselworld. I think it is as likely or not that there will be dozens, if not hundreds, of presenters there. The question really is probably how big will it be, how important will it be, rather than whether it's there or not. Which really comes to the next question of, presuming that there is a Baselworld, will any of the big players go there? Now that's interesting. So what you've got is this new show, which is essentially the Rolex Patek show with a few hangers on. You've got SIHH / Watches and Wonders, which is essentially Richemont plus a couple of key independents. Swatch haven't bedded down anything yet, so they began to run a show. They ran half a show last year. They didn't run anything in 2020, so they don't really have a home yet. LVMH have been in or out, so it's quite possible that one of those two brands, if not both, could choose to essentially take on Baselworld and make it their own show. And that's where it does become interesting, where you start talking about a Richemont show, a Rolex Patek show, a Swatch show, an LVMH show. It just so happens that one of them is using a well-established and storied name from history, i.e. Baselworld, as their show. That would be an interesting thing. I mean, if you think about it from this moment, imagine it was LVMH. LVMH, first off, in the watch community, relatively smaller player, probably number 4 in the big watch groups, 4 or 5. But as a group, as a totality, LVMH dwarfs Rolex Group. LVMH is far bigger than pretty much anyone else in this game. What if LVMH chose to buy MCH, that is amongst the many companies in the LVMH pantheon? They bought the company that owns Baselworld, and then LVMH could quite literally own that name, own that brand. They could run several Baselworlds. Remember, we started life with one Disneyland, but now there's Disneylands everywhere. Could you have Baselworld TM turning up wherever the hell they want to run a show? Could you have multiple Baselworlds? They are in fact just the LVMH show. I don't know. But I think That's why earlier I said I wouldn't put a line through Baselworld just yet. During these crises, companies, smaller companies that have struggled, have tended to be predated upon by the larger companies that are doing okay. I have a suspicion it's as likely or not that MCH could be bought and consumed by one of these watch brands. That's as likely as them being allowed to die and fall by the wayside. After all, if you're thinking about setting up a whole show, if you could buy at fire sale prices a show that's already set up, wouldn't that just be easier? Putting aside the idea that LVMH or a company like that would buy Baselworld, is it possible that Swatch would now return? One of my big theories about why Swatch left in the first place was because, frankly, they just got sick and tired of playing second fiddle to the Rolex Patek show, and how those two companies just simply dominated that show. And I've made several videos where I said, I didn't actually understand why any big player would ever tolerate turning up to a show that Rolex or a Patek were at, because you're only ever second fiddle. So now that they've gone, is this an opportunity for for Swatch to come back to Baselworld? That's an interesting play, and that would really, really test a lot of people, a lot of the watch media. What is interesting is, one of the observations that I'd make is that a lot of this push for Baselworld over the last 3 or 4 years has been to become more media friendly, more mass market friendly, more consumer friendly. Curiously, where Rolex and Patek are taking their show is in exactly the opposite direction. They seem to be going into a much more, and their literature says, this is a retailer, select invite only, super high-end media kind of thing. I get the impression it's kind of like SIHH, the old SIHH, wound up even another notch or two. So again, that feeds back to my very first point about, I have a suspicion that this moving away from Baselworld isn't really the fault of Baselworld. It's more about the fact and their failings to engage with the new consumer environment. I have a suspicion it's more about Rolex not wanting to be at a show that even tries to engage with a new business to consumer model, and a desperate desire to go back to a strict business to business model show. And if you think about it, it makes sense with the way that Rolex does business. Rolex is not a business to consumer model. It is a business to business model. The other thing I would note is that after years of saying that shows have got nowhere to go, that shows are really dying, that shows, this whole concept of the trade show is pretty much done and dusted. In the aftermath to this discussion, a lot of those exact same people have been saying, this is terrible news for those people that relied on this show. This is terrible news for all of these other brands. It's easy to talk about shows going away when you've got a show. When you've got a show, it's easy to think that that show is disposable. You get used to the idea that it's there, and you can throw rocks at it and it's fairly harmless because it's going to be there and you don't have to worry about when it's not. But when it actually leaves and you're confronted with, oh my God, I might only have press releases on the net. I might only have videos. I was prepared to kind of throw rocks at it, but I did kind of like the idea that there was this one show where people I trust would go physically handle watches, and now that's gone. Maybe we're beginning to realize that we actually wanted shows more than we thought. Interestingly, that Rolex and Patek didn't just walk out and say, we're not doing a show anymore. They just created their own different show. So yeah, I think that one of the things that this is, paradoxically, Rolex and Patek and the others leaving this show, to me, has actually almost highlighted the importance of the show, rather than the disposability of a show. What it has also highlighted is the importance of, for some people, them controlling their show. And that's a very different question. So that's really about it. I've kind of run out of thoughts to have about this. I'll probably do some more thoughts later. I'll take some more notes. And as the story evolves, there'll be more to talk about. This is very podcasty. This is very much just me talking to the camera. I should have said that warning right at the front, but then people might turn off and I'd lose views. So what the hey. I've been Pete McConville. This has been Not So Obvious Watches. These have been my thoughts on some of the biggest news in watches for a couple of months. Hope you enjoyed it. If you think I'm wrong, tell me in the comments. We'll have a bit of a chat about it. If there's other questions you have, other things you'd like to explore, please let me know, and I'll have a think about it, and we'll poke and probe at these things. I want to make this something of a conversation, so I would love to hear get your feedback, get your ideas, and continue this conversation. See you later. Bye.